Hey, I'm Josh, the Green New World Guide. This video is intended for teachers and students to watch together once the board is set up. So you're about to save the world from climate change, or try to at least. But before we begin, hit pause and take a look at the board, see what you notice, record your observations, and then hit play, see how many of those details you noticed. Now the first thing a lot of people notice is the emissions tokens. Those are these colorful squares scattered all around the board. Each emission token represents one gigaton of greenhouse gas being emitted into the atmosphere every year. Now, currently it's at 53. If you want to take the time to count them, there are 53 on there, or you can just trust me. And that is a pretty accurate number. At the moment, in 2024, when this was made, there were about 53 gigatons of greenhouse gas being put into the atmosphere every year by human technologies. Now the four different colors represent four distinct sources of greenhouse gases, and each source requires a different kind of solution. The first one here, the yellow guy, these are emissions from electricity generation. So that's any kind of power plant that burns fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, whatever. The orange ones represent transportation. So those require, that's your gasoline cars of course, and those require unique solutions because the solution has to be portable. The purple tiles represent concrete. Concrete is unique because it needs a bananas amount of heat to produce the concrete. Unlike say power generation, which does use heat, but it's usually just a means to boil water, to produce steam, to spin a turbine. Generators are cool, you should look it up, but concrete is unique in that you need heat to produce it, so no amount of electrification would ever really solve that. Finally, we've got the red ones. These represent agriculture, specifically livestock agriculture, specifically cows whose burps produce so much methane that it actually does make a significant contribution to climate change. So again, obviously requiring a unique solution that wouldn't be the same as cars or power plants. The second thing a lot of people notice are the cities. You'll see that every region has a city. Of course, in real life, it's more than one city. You'll see that Asia's city is kind of separated from the mainland there, Manila in the Philippines. These cities were chosen because they are at or below sea level, and they're very populous. And so as the sea level rises, those cities are very susceptible to flooding, and people will have to move. In fact, people have already started moving away from these neighborhoods. This brings us to these little blue wavy marks that happen as the temperature rises. Every time the temperature crosses one of these blue wavy marks, the sea level is going to rise. And one person from each of these cities is going to be forced to find a new home. And so they're going to be going into, for lack of a better word, the refugee camp up at the top there. Maybe you notice that as we get enough refugees, we get game over. And that is the first of two ways to lose this game, is to fill the entire refugee camp. And then that is an automatic game over. There are just too many unhoused people for the earth to handle. It's too unstable. Now let's go back to the thermometer right here. So this brings us to the other way that you can lose this game. Number 2 of 2 ways to lose this game is for the temperature counter to rise all the way to 2 degrees above pre-industrial norms, or 2 degrees above normal, we'll say. Once you hit that, that is another automatic game over. Now let's discuss how the temperature rises. At the moment, we have 53 emissions on the board. At the end of each round, your teacher's gonna look at this and round up to the next, the top row of numbers represents how many emissions are on the board. The bottom row of numbers represents how many spaces the thermometer is going to rise. So it says round up. So at the end of the first round, you are going to look up to 11, and you're going to raise the temperature by 11 notches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you can see that almost puts us over a sea level rise, but not quite. So after the first round, we don't have any refugees yet. Now, I mentioned the 2 ways that you can lose this game. Probably would be a good time to mention the 1 way that you win, and that is by reaching net zero success. So every time that a emissions token gets taken off the board, the emissions counter gets lowered by 1, and eventually that emissions counter is going to drop all the way to 0, hopefully, and that is when you can celebrate that you successfully saved the world. Now, before we move on, there are 2 more things that you may have noticed that are worth noticing. One is that China and India are separate regions. The rest of them are continents, but China and India are their own thing. Now, some of you might say that's because China and India are so big and populous, and you would be absolutely right. China and India produce so many greenhouse gas emissions that they actually count more like continents. They're more comparable to a continent like North America or Europe or Africa. Now, to be clear, that is not a condemnation of Indian or Chinese people. It just means there's a lot of them. In the same way you might have noticed Australia is not even on the map. And that isn't because Australians never drive cars or use dirty electricity. It's simply because there just aren't enough people in Australia for it to really register on the ground. And finally, bonus points if anyone saw this detail on the thermometer. Now, the thermometer goes up by tenths, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, etc. But if you look closely, the little spaces, the little notches on the thermometer change as the temperature rises. They get bigger or more spaced out. And that means that, those 11 notches that we had to raise the temperature on the first round, they got us, not even 0.3 degrees warmer. But if we were up here, 11 notches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, well, now we moved 0.6. We moved twice as far as we otherwise would have, which means that the heating situation gets more and more urgent as it goes on. Now, there's a good reason for this, and it's called the albedo effect, ALBEDO. The albedo effect, it's really interesting. I recommend you research it. There's some videos in the at Green New World Games YouTube channel. But the long and short of it is, as the world heats up, the rate at which it heats up increases. So it feels like just a small increase at the beginning of the game is going to be a much larger increase at the end of the game. So don't let that lure you into a false sense of security.
Okay, enough talking. Let's save the world.